Senator Portman.
Thank you, Chairman Lankford, and thanks for your personal commitment to this issue and your leadership on it. It is great to be here with my colleague, Senator Blumenthal. I appreciate his leadership on this in the Senate, and always good to be with my friend Darrell Issa, Representative Chavez, and of course Ranking Member Donnelly. And we have a number of House members who have done great work on this, including the members here today, and of course Ranking Member Cummings and now Congressman Chris Smith on the board. So it seems to me this is a great opportunity in a bicameral and a bipartisan way for us to make progress on a critical issue. In the Senate, we also have a great team. Senator Rubio, Franken, Collins, McCaskill, and Joe Lieberman have all signed on to the bill. And we have other colleagues who are very interested in pursuing this. So even in a time when it seems difficult to achieve reasonable and common sense objectives, this seems like one that we can move forward on, and I appreciate the leadership you all have shown. This cuts across all party lines, philosophical lines, because it's really about something much more fundamental, and that's who we are as a people. It's about respecting and protecting human dignity. This legislation, as my colleague has talked about, is designed to ensure that the contracting dollars that come from our taxpayers, after all, are spent in a manner that's consistent with our deeply held values as a nation. And it's a lot of money, over $20 billion a year in Afghanistan and Iraq alone. And so those contracting dollars are significant, and it requires clear rules and oversight. Despite the existing protections, including the Trafficking Victims Protection Act 2000, reports have made it very clear that human trafficking practices in connection with U.S. overseas contracts remain a very significant problem. To put this in some context, there are over 70,000 third-country nationals who now work for contractors and subcontractors of the U.S. military, again in Iraq and Afghanistan alone. In most cases, this work provides valuable job opportunities, but it's not hard to see also how these workers, recruited for low-wage jobs, often thousands of miles from their home country, can find themselves vulnerable to illegal or fraudulent employment practices. We've heard this most recently from the Wartime Contracting Commission. I know you all have looked at that report, but also the Inspectors General of the State Department and the Defense Department, each of which have reported that trafficking remains an issue and that existing protections in connection with such trafficking are insufficient. Broadly defined, as Senator Blumenthal has said, it means forced labor and severely coercive labor practices, including the practice of recruiting workers to leave home based on fraudulent promises about working conditions or wages. It includes confiscating passports, charging workers recruitment fees that consume more than a month's salary, creating indentured servitude type conditions, and it includes unlawful restrictions on the ability of workers to return home, and sometimes failure to assist in the repatriation when jobs are over. And the oversight is limited. The Wartime Contracting Commission, for example, reported that, quote, some prime contractors, although not themselves knowingly violating the prohibitions on trafficking, have not proactively used all their capacities to supervise their labor brokers or subs. The State Department's Inspector General's report, similar, stated that, quote, since contracting regulations do not specify how to monitor contractors for trafficking in persons, the IG could not conclude that trafficking in persons monitoring is effective. The Inspector Generals likewise observed that, quote, contracting initiated reporting was the only means by which DOD could obtain timely and relevant information regarding actual or alleged violations. That's what we're providing for in this legislation. I think we should be clear here today that the overwhelming majority of U.S. contractors and subcontractors are honorable. They're law-abiding. They've made it a priority to ensure that abusive labor practices play no role in the very challenging work they are doing for all of us in Iraq, Afghanistan, and elsewhere around the world. But there are problems, obviously. Many of the contractors we have consulted with already do have in place some internal policies designed to prevent, detect, and stop human trafficking in connection with their own operations and some of their subcontractors. And I think what our proposal is basically is to ensure that those best practices are adopted by other contractors and they become the standard practices on all significant U.S. contracts abroad. Senator Blumenthal has done a great job laying out the legislation. I think he's right to put it into three categories: prevention, accountability, and enforcement. Strengthens current legal safeguards, requiring contractors to have these proactive prevention plans, really. It's a compliance plan to ensure that there is not any activity that directly supports human trafficking. It also gives contracting officers the ability to impose appropriate penalties, very important, including referring a contractor for disbarment for the most serious violations. It beefs up reporting and monitoring requirements to ensure that credible evidence of human trafficking immediately triggers an investigation to uncover the facts. Again, that comes right out of these reports. And the bill closes a loophole in Federal criminal law by extending to overseas contracts the same prohibition against fraudulent employment practices that they would have here in the United States. So again, I think these common sense reforms will ensure that the performance of overseas contracts paid for by our constituents, American taxpayers, are consistent with the values that we all hold dear as Americans. So, gentlemen, I look forward to working with you all and my colleagues in the Senate. This committee will play a central role, of course, to make progress on this important reform effort this year. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senators, thank you for being here. Thanks for the work. This is a good
Mr.
example.
Chairman?
Yes, sir.
If I could.
Absolutely.
Just briefly, just for 1 second, I want to thank you for coming here. The fact is that when we show people that we're bipartisan and bicameral, we show people that legislation is possible even in an election year. So both your legislation, the DATA Act, some of the other tools that are going to allow us to more efficiently track and inform people when there's, in fact, a possibility of an honest day pay and an honest day's work not being linked together, which certainly is often the case where we pay the full dollar and much of it never gets to the recipient who is supposed to get it for doing the work. So, Mr. Chairman, thank you for what you're doing, but Senators, I'm particularly thankful for your coming here and showing the world that this is an important enough issue to get it done and get it done this year. Thank you. Yield back.
Absolutely.